Hey everyone, this is our presentation for the Algorand Encode Hackathon. So our team is Sam Tosin, who is one of the premier OSS developers on Algorand, and me, Brian Haney. I used to be a lawyer, now I primarily do open source software development on Algorand as well. So the problem that we set out to solve is compliance for securities. So compliance for securities is a really difficult problem. In large part just because there's a lack of clarity as to which digital assets are security tokens and which digital assets are non-security tokens. For digital assets that are security tokens, they're required to register with the SEC, and this could take years and cost millions of dollars. It's a big problem for a lot of startups. I've had friends who have started companies that have just failed completely after spending over $250,000 on legal fees to try and register assets with the SEC. So for a lot of projects, it just simply is not possible for them to be able to afford the high costs associated with registering. But they can still create digital assets because we know that some digital assets are not securities. So how do you engineer a digital asset that's not a security or a utility token with specific purpose? There's been over 96 SEC enforcement actions already since sort of cryptocurrency development and securities have begun. But one of the key questions we sort of have is why are they charging companies like Ripple or LBRY and not projects like Ethereum or Uniswap? So it seems like a totally selective enforcement or randomized enforcement scheme, which a lot of people think is unconstitutional. So the solution, if you do have a security token, if you have created an asset that is a security, like you have to register it with the SEC. That's the only way to follow the law. But you can also create non-security tokens, and that's really important for innovation. The reason it's important is because there needs to be a way for people to use the blockchain in applications or to use digital assets for applications. So these are assets that are intended for use that are not sold as an investment or for projects that aren't going around and seeking institutional investment contracts. And for those types of projects, there's still a lot of regulatory risk because there's still the worry that well, even if you have a non-security token, how do we know the SEC isn't just going to try and say it's a security and then come after us, right? And that's a big problem. Ultimately, this sort of lack of clarity associated with the regulations is flexibility for enforcement agencies, right? So they can simply just manipulate the words in the law to get the outcome that they ultimately want, which is a big problem for entrepreneurs. There's a lot of cases. The system isn't perfect. There are a lot of cases where you see the SEC, charging entrepreneurs with fraud for unregistered offerings, where the defendants in the cases were clearly not committing securities fraud. So it's an imperfect system, and there are problems with it. And the goal here really is just to make it better by automating securities compliance. So what we're doing is we're statistically measuring the probability that an asset should be considered a security based on the guidance that the SEC has put out. And you can imagine it's really easy for legislatures to solve this problem, right? They can simply say only tokens that represent an equity interest in a company are securities, and now we have a clear line and a clear guidance, but it's highly unlikely that were to happen. The new bill that was introduced by Senator Lomas is simply going to complicate the existing infrastructure. So we think that the solution makes the most sense here is just simply to automate securities compliance and say, look, we can't really predict what you're going to make up on the fly for the SEC, but we can look at what you've said and look at the law and measure that using natural language processing to say that this is most likely not a security token. And we can use that technology to help other non-security tokens to make sure that they're following the law and not operating or engineering assets in a way that may be construed as securities. So our roadmap, so we first put out a research paper in 2021, and we also had a first customer, or I had a first customer for this sort of technology on the Ethereum blockchain. In 2022, in Q2, we had our first customer on the Algorand blockchain for the technology. It was AlgoStig, which is one of the premier DeFi and staking platforms. We also got a grant from the Solana Foundation to continue developing the work, and we built out a database and a demo for them as well. Um, our plans for Q3 are to launch on Solana and on Algorand. And for Q4, we're going to look toward automating reports. So using the software not just to calculate the probability that an asset will be considered a security, but to actually find a way to generate reports that customers can use to help to design and begin their compliance protocols. And finally, we'll work to scale that to more customers as well. Thanks for watching and have a great day.